and I'm very happy to present tonight's speaker, Debbie Reid. She is a well-known leader in our area and has really helped in advancement of the stewardship and the conservation of our native plant communities. And so we're very excited to have Debbie here tonight to talk about the water sponge carbon sink and creating a resilient city. And I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to ask Debbie, she's going to pull up her presentation. And I'm going to remind everybody that if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll be keeping track of those. And there will be a point midway that we're going to have some questions. But at any time you've got a question, please put it in the chat. And Debbie, are you still on mute?
Yeah, sure there, Debbie, but you're muted at this point.
So Debbie, your presentation went away. It was for a minute.
Ah, she's unmuted.
Yes, I did get that accomplished. Aren't you proud of me?
Hey, Debbie.
Okay, we're going. We're getting it. Oh, how's that?
Awesome.
We don't see it yet.
Awesome. Yeah, it's there. I see it.
Okay.
I'm not seeing it.
I'm going to go ahead and turn on my video, but you're not seeing the presentation?
I'm not seeing the presentation.
I'm seeing it.
I see it.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay. All right, I'm going to stop the video. Wow, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, Lee, for that introduction. And I want you to know that I have included some additional information in this presentation that has never been presented in San Antonio before. So hopefully I don't bore you to tears because I have become such a soil nerd, but I'm excited about sharing this information about using soils as a mitigation strategy to create a water sponge carbon sink resilient city. And begin with, we will, okay. Sorry, there we go. I found it. I'm not going to read all these topics off to you, but basically what we're going to be talking about is how soils are used as a mitigation tool. What's the deal about ecosystem services and what San Antonio is already doing. And then again, we'll end with what we can do to promote these ideas if you think they are good ideas. In the beginning, we're talking about the natural world, and there's been a lot of research over the years. Bob Costanza was one of the leaders in trying to actually put dollar values on ecosystem services, or he called it natural capital, and how those could be evaluated so that you could determine their values to the planet, to the people. And so there's been a lot of mechanisms that have been developed on how we look at the natural world and the services that it provides so that we can better, I'm going to just say conserve, preserve, and do a better cost benefit analysis. And so in the natural world and urban areas are typically called green space. And you'll see a lot of use of the word of green infrastructure and green space kind of get thrown together. And I even use them interchangeably. But for this presentation, we're going to try to keep to green space. And these green spaces provide ecosystem services that can assist in meeting our urban challenges, right? So the services, this is the amazing part, and this is like the crux here. The services that are provided by our green spaces can be either decreased or increased by the way they are managed. And that's why it's so great to work with this group, because you get it already. You have such a great foundation for understanding these concepts with our nativescapes. So in our green spaces, we know that they contain trees and vegetation and soils. And with the tree component, it's been well documented. And as many of you know, in my other life, I was a total tree nerd. And that preserving, planting trees was my life. So the exciting thing for San Antonio, I mean, we have been waiting for this document for over 2 years, is the recently released San Antonio Urban Forest Inventory and Analysis, which actually included the area right outside of our city called the ETJ. And it has, again, put into today's numbers that are 138 million trees and the benefits that it provides to all citizens. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, this is a public benefit of removing 6,500 tons of air pollution. And they've actually been able to go ahead and put a monetary value on health costs. And I have been finding that very difficult to do. So it says that for our residents, we're saving them $63 million in health costs. And the exciting thing also in saving money is how trees can reduce the stormwater runoff. So by managing 380 million cubic feet, this is an avoidance of cost of what we would need to do flood control management projects. And then for energy savings, we're looking at 22 million. And of course, when you save all that in energy savings, and that's also a reduction in emissions. So this is where it gets kind of tricky when you start looking at ecosystem services. You got all these byproducts that come off of the big ones that our green spaces can provide. So this is the exciting part. This is a kind of a newly emerging strategy for using soils as a mitigation technique. And, you know, when I first kind of started looking at this, all because of one of our Native Plant Society members, and we'll give her acknowledgement later on, kind of introduced the concept. And I kind of remembered it, but there is so much new research out there. I can't wait to share some of this with you. So to kind of understand how soils are used as a mitigation strategy, let's talk a little bit about soils and how they're made up. So you've got this big pie, right? And the main component is our minerals. That's your clay, silt, sand, gravel, etc. And then you've got the air and the water that's kind of mixed into the mineral particles, which it's not real clear here, but you're going to understand a little bit more about how important that space is in the future. And so the crux of the ecosystem services that soils provide is from the organic matter. And in San Antonio, I know if you've done any gardening here at all, you know how difficult it is to maintain organic matter in San Antonio. And gosh, I wish this was an interactive in-person platform, because I would call out to you. So why is it difficult to keep organic matter in our soils? All right, I'm going to pretend that some people answered and let you know that one of the reasons is our warm season. No, it doesn't matter whether it's winter, it's still pretty relatively warm, or our summer, which is extremely hot. And with the organic matter and all the organisms and the life that's feeding on that, it's breaking it down so fast because their respiration rate is based on temperature. So can't you just imagine all those little organisms, the micro and the macro, breathing as hard as they can during July in San Antonio and breaking down your organic matter. So looking at that organic matter and how it can perform a function. One of the most important functions is soil carbon storage. And this is where we base our air quality. It's just natural for soils to be pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and storing it or using it in the soil. And of course, human activities and climate can affect this process. And I kind of told you about San Antonio's climate and how that affects it. And so it can be re-released back into the atmosphere, or we can increase its storage capacity, leading to greater mitigation potential. And all the numbers that I'm giving you and what we're going to be talking about, it's really based on a healthy soil. And this was the amazing thing. It appears that a healthy soil can sequester approximately 3 more times carbon in the soil than above ground vegetation. So when you put the above ground vegetation and a healthy soil, and we start counting that healthy soil and managing in that way, we've got a huge mitigation strategy that we can look at. And of course, this is the good news and the bad news. Around the world, including in San Antonio and the surrounding area, our soils are pretty degraded. So there's only really one place to go, and that's better for us and the world. So this is a good thing. And based on that, there's a hypothesis that's out there, and I'll give you the reference to the book that quotes this, is that it's been hypothesized that a 2% increase in soil organic matter in the world's soils could take care of the excess carbon dioxide within 10 years. And to me, natural carbon sequestration is the only way to go. And I think that in San Antonio, we can be leaders. And again, looking at storing that carbon. And these numbers, when you're looking at the research, this is just thrown all over the place, but try to kind of keep in mind that soil carbon, and when you store it, you're removing 3.67 tons of carbon dioxide for every ton of soil carbon stored. So, type of organic matter matters. And this is what I'm really looking forward to sharing with the Native Plant Society members and our guests, because you may have the understanding that when you're looking at organic matter and where it is in the soil, it makes a difference. And I love this chart. I was so happy to have found it and totally stole it. And I apologize. I don't give a lot of citations in my slides, but if you need any or would like additional citations, I'll be glad to share those with you. So the organic layer, you know, when you've got a native landscape and you've got it all mulched, and a year later you kind of move that mulch, you can see that broken down material where you can't even tell that hardly tell that it was mulch. But that is what we call organic layer, which will move into the topsoil. And in that topsoil, you can actually see the difference in the texture and structure of the soil, not the texture, but the structure. It's more friable, it's darker, it looks good, it feels good, it smells good. And then as that organic material starts moving down through the profile, and that's where stormwater becomes really important in helping to move that material, that carbon down lower into the soil profile, that's where it becomes more stable, because that top layer is so reactive. It's coming and going. Carbon is being stored, and then it's being decomposed, and the CO2 is going back off. So you really are looking at the carbon that's pulled from the atmosphere, stored in the organic layer, and then moves down through the profile, getting all the way down there to the most resistant types, which of course, that's where fossil fuels come from, right? So there we've talked a little bit about air quality and doing carbon sequestration and how important that is. And now this is kind of probably one of the most exciting parts to me, is the stormwater impact, water quantity and quality. So as I mentioned, the soil organic matter plays a crucial role as it fuels all the life in the soil. And I love this image because when you're standing on top of a soil, you just don't imagine. And this is what I want you to do. The next time you're standing out in your landscape area, I want you to imagine how alive it is down there. And we don't see most of this, right? And nematodes, when you look at nematodes or hear nematodes, you go, pest. But it turns out there's hundreds of nematode species, but only a couple that are actually a pest. So all of these guys are being fed by our soil organic matter. And this is what really creates a healthy soil. And a healthy soil has plenty of air pockets. It's allowing the stormwater to enter and percolate. And that organic matter has other qualities that are so amazing. Like a sponge, it can absorb 3 times more or 300 times more water and nutrients than, say, a clay particle, which can also absorb water and nutrients. But a sponge is like your grandma. It is so easy with the water and the nutrients that it makes it available to plants. So plants can just reach over and grab some water or some nutrients right off of that organic matter. And if you can increase your organic matter in your soils, in addition to whatever you have, you can increase the additional amount of water that's stored in your soil by 20,000 gallons per acre. And to me, when you start looking at the green space that we have and the ability, without too much effort, increasing our soil organic matter by 1%. The reduction in stormwater runoff is incredible. This reduces the strain on our drainage infrastructure. I get carried away because I'm going to tell you this again later, but it also reduces peak flooding. And as that water starts moving through the soil profile, it's removing the pollutants. And it doesn't stay right there. I mean, it recharges our groundwater, our aquifers, and then it slowly goes to the lowest point in the watershed, which of course is our river and our creeks and any lakes that are there. And so it slowly refills, recharges these surface waters with cleaner water. Okay, there we go. Here's some real life samples. This is from the Blackland Prairies in the near northeast part of San Antonio. And yes, it is my yard. Okay, on the left, can you see the granular friable texture or structure of that soil and all the little air pockets? That's what gives the ability to support healthy plants and healthy soils, are those air pockets that are packed full of organic matter. And then the soil on the right, it's embarrassing, but yes, that's from my yard also, but I do have a reason. This is right where the roofing supply truck went over my yard to drop the roofing materials on my roof. This is just such a great example of why you don't want to run equipment or cars or vehicles over your soil. Look at the compaction. There's no airspace. There's no structure and very little organic matter. It's just really not nearly as live, even though, again, this is just from the surface of the soil, just like to the left. So while we've got these major services that Green Spaces provides, the air quality, water quality, reducing peak floods for helping with flood control, recharging aquifers and groundwater, maintaining stream and river flows longer, which of course for us, part of our water quality issues are due to low flows. But when you've got this kind of dynamic going on, this is when you have increased plant growth with reduced irrigation needs, which leads to biodiversity. You've got the biodiversity in your soils, in your plants, and of course, then subsequently your wildlife. And with all this green material and our green infrastructure, and it's all functioning in a healthy, optimum healthy manner, then you're also reducing heat stress in the community. And all of this leads to improved public health. So you're providing climate resiliency because you're buffering from floods, you're buffering from droughts, you're buffering from low water or low stream flows for water quality issues. And you're also providing the recreational opportunities. And there's so many great videos out there about doing this type of work, working in the green spaces, and you're aware of it also, and creating community cohesiveness. So using this information, how do we use it? Hopefully you've gotten a little bit of how the using soils and the vegetation can assist us in meeting urban challenge. And this is where we talked about taking a little break and taking questions.
Yes, so Debbie, we have a couple of questions. And the first one, it was early on and you mentioned that there was a report and the person was wondering if the report was available and whether or not it was readable.
That's a really good question. Yes, the report's available. I'm not sure about the readability yet. That's going to take me a while. You know what I did to get those numbers? Fortunately, in the newspaper, the Express News, actually, anyway, a newspaper summarized the findings, and I just copied that. I went into that report and went, whoa, this is going to take a long time. But hopefully we'll have, and maybe that might be another great presentation, Lee, is to have some of the folks that worked on that to come to you and give a presentation and summarize it for us.
Great idea. Okay, and then the other question is, you had an acronym on one of your slides. What is SOM?
SOM. SOM is soil organic matter. Yep, sorry about that.
Thank you very much. We're all learning. So that's it for now for questions. And folks, please put any questions you've got in the chat.
All right, here we go. How do we use this information? Dun, dun, dun. So a lot of this information about using soils came from Lisa Martinez, and she sat on the San Antonio Climate Action and Adaptation Plan as the Master Naturalist representative on the Water and Natural Resource Technical Committee. And as she and I started sharing this, and I just became an avid reader, looking this up and how to use it and what are we looking at? Is it even, can you even consider it an effective mitigation strategy? And so as we went forward and we worked with the great big group, and eventually there were a lot of mitigation strategies put up on a whiteboard, right? And we all had to vote on them. And I want you to know that using public green spaces to sequester CO2 as a mitigation strategy was one of the, there were two number ones, and it was one of the number one strategies that was voted on. And since that time, and because of Lisa reaching out and doing more exploration, we've partnered, GIA, Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance, and partners have been working on trying to implement this strategy, focusing on using our soils. Because we got information for the trees, we know how to plug that information is, but using the soil is kind of new, especially for our part of the country and in an urban area. So what we decided is that the first thing you got to do is have some baselines. What is our current carbon level in the soils? And then, you know, how do we enhance? What are some of the practices that we could use in enhancing those ecosystem services that the soils can provide? And then applying those practices, evaluating their effectiveness, and then hopefully developing programs to educate and then to provide incentives for using those strategies. And then, of course, especially in a city like San Antonio, where politics rule, creating the policies to increase the amount and improve the management of green spaces. And there's so many different cultures here. It's a lot. And we'll talk a little bit about barriers in a minute. So Lisa made a cold call to the Natural Resource Conservation Service state office in Temple, Texas. And she called them because the NRCS was responsible for doing the National Soil Carbon Assessment. And they focus primarily on agriculture soils. That's primarily what NRCS is known for, is working with the agriculture industry. And they actually arrived in San Antonio, met with us, and eventually agreed to do this analysis because they actually needed to do some soil sampling to update the Bexar County Soil Survey. And in all this, the negotiation, we had Public Works, the Office of Sustainability, and Parks and Recreation. I cannot say enough about the support and just the helping to make this happen that has come from Parks and Recreation. So Parks and the NRCS have an MOU. Parks is making available properties across the city for soil sampling. The NRCS will start in fact, this summer, will start taking soil samples. They'll analyze them, and it won't be just for the soil carbon. They'll also be looking at some percolation data, and this percolation data is going to be crucial for stormwater management folks. How can they use this data for increasing or decreasing stormwater runoff from green spaces? So then they'll come back to us and they'll be meet with us to make some recommendations on how we might be able to manage our public green spaces in a better way to enhance these ecosystem services. And so they'll be looking at sample sites around the city. And this is a map. The little yellow spots are all the samples, and it will include a lot of parks, but some schools and some other areas. They're going to be looking at soil types and ecoregions, the uses or ecosystem types, and then we also ask for them to include city council districts so that we make sure that there's some sites in every district. So you may be familiar with this ecoregion map for Bexar County. There we are with the star, and that we have these 4 major ecosystems. And the good news is that the ecoregions pretty much reflect our soil types. They have a lot more detailed soil types than what the Native Plant Society or myself actually need to know, but that gives you an idea of how they did their sampling to make sure that they had sample sites in each of these areas. And then the different uses or ecosystems. Each of them have different potentials. And so we're going to make sure that we have some of these ecosystems or uses included in the samples. And I just want to bring your attention, and this was really tough. We spent, oh my God, months going through the data and trying to find how the data was reported in net carbon sequestration. That's like what you can, at the end of the year, from all the comings and goings of carbon in a soil, what can you look at being gaining? And so these are kind of some numbers. We're still working on those, but we tried to find papers that were as close to our climate and soils as possible, but it was really tough. But I want to bring your attention to the active riparian floodplain forest, because we got a lot of those. And fortunately, a lot of them are in greenway trails, and we can work with Parks and Rec and helping to boost the biodiversity, the way they're being managed or how they can be managed to meet everybody's needs for stormwater runoff, cleaning up the water, reducing runoff, and storing a lot of soil carbon. So to me, this is going to be one of the most important focus places, and I'm looking forward to see what we can do in the future. So just to give you an idea, we went in and got all the latest information on acreage for the Parks and Recreation space. And so the aquifer protection is the conservation easements that have been captured for aquifer protection, right? And the Edwards Aquifer Authority is actually manages the property, and they're doing some incredible research. I can't wait to see. They're actually going to look at the amount of soil depth and the recharge into the Edwards Aquifer. And looking at our city parks, this is what we've got under the city's control. And when you put all together, this is pretty significant when you look at if we can store, or typically storing an additional ton per acre, basically is what that other data, that's an average, then we're looking at being able to remove an additional 618,000 tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. And I apologize, I don't have my notes. I could get to them, but it's like a bunch of cars. I forgot how many, 112 million cars or something that's equivalent to. So this is significant if we can increase this type of ecosystem service from our parklands. So how do we support the city's effort? Well, I think just knowing about it is really exciting. And hopefully at your next dinner conversation with guests that you'll actually share this information with them, because you will be the life of the party when you do so, right? So looking at our park system, this is a really important part of the city's green infrastructure. And to preserve and increase the amount of this park green space is crucial. and then modifying development standards to support our goals. And of course, the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance has developed UDC amendments for the next UDC cycle that will be looking at floodplain management, stormwater, and park dedication ordinances that can support these goals. And then we want to make sure that we're also supporting parks and public works in their day-to-day operations, modifying management practices, and hopefully getting some more stream restoration efforts in gear. And I can see where the Native Plant Society folks could play a huge role in that. And then we're asking that all green infrastructure techniques are used on all public spaces to increase that green space, pervious space. So just to give you an idea about the park's dedication, and I wasn't sure, but Fred and I talked, and we think this is like good information. And I don't want to be the environmental advocate that I am, but just making sure that this is the type of things that we would like to try to modify. In 2001, we created a parks dedication ordinance. And of course, that was with the goal of increasing public parks for all citizens and to meet the National Parks Association's goal of everybody living within a 10-minute walk of a park. But we have found through the process since that time, there's been amendments in the way that's being interpreted. At this time, when I went out to look for additional funds for some trails linkages to the Salado Creek Greenway, is that I found out that all the new apartments around the Austin Highway, Harry Wurzbach area, and we're looking at over 1,000 apartments, that every one of them were able to meet their park dedication requirements by building their swimming pool and their clubhouses. And most of these did not have any green space. So again, we're looking at hoping to make that change in the Unified Development Code. And also our current policies, we kind of want to be more in control of stormwater runoff. So basically right now, this is the image on the left, is that we're taking money, it's called fee in lieu of, so that a development does not have to detain any stormwater on site. Typically they have to show no negative impact or adverse or negligible adverse impact. But basically, we're building huge detention facilities to reduce the amount of detention that's throughout the watersheds. And that's what we feel like we'll have more dispersed, appropriately scaled green infrastructure or low impact development strategies that would assist to store more carbon, reduce the heat island in these areas, and of course, reduce flooding. Okay, that's enough advocacy. Thank you for listening. So what else can we do? So it's been wonderful to be reaching out to folks. We have talked with the San Antonio Water System. They're looking at retrofitting their water saver rebate program to have a carbon sequestration component. And again, I think we talked about the Edwards Aquifer and the River Authority. There are leaders in being able to really understand, promote, and actually fund some of these concepts. But we've also been working with Joint Base San Antonio. They've just finished doing their compatibility plan, and they've incorporated some of these concepts into their compatibility plan. And hopefully we'll also be able to work with them to include some of this on base. There's a lot of ways that we can actually build additional value or credit through carbon credit programs and to promote things. I don't know if you're familiar with the Old Spanish walking trail off of Fredericksburg Road, but that is actually a big regional detention facility that relieved a lot of flooding that was happening in this area. And we think this is a great use of how to have multiple uses on these green spaces. So residential properties, because you think, okay, well, that's a lot of commercial and governmental properties, but look at the over 500,000 homes in San Antonio. It's big. We have an incredible role that we can play in this. And of course, the first thing we can do is reduce or eliminate gasoline-powered equipment to decrease emissions. But increasing your soil organic matter and protecting it and allowing that carbon to mitigate deeper into your soil profile for long-term storage. And I think that that's a neat concept to kind of, when you go out and you start managing your landscape, to keep those concepts in mind. And of course, we know that using the layered method, landscaping design can increase how much you can pack in or stack into a landscape design. And that's not disking prairies. Prairies are incredible. They have their own benefits that include all of these, including the pollinators. And then, of course, using the native deep-rooted long-lived plants to increase soil carbon or CO2 sequestration while promoting stormwater infiltration. So looking at an average little lot, and this is like 120 by 60, you can sequester every year approximately 3/4 of a ton of CO2. You can absorb an additional 3,300 gallons of stormwater per event when you increase your soil organic matter by approximately 1%. So it's just another way of looking at doing what a lot of you are already doing. And how can the Native Plant Society promote this concept? Well, you kind of already do by what you already is a part of your agenda, and that's reaching a diverse populations. And of course, hopefully we'll be able to reach into some additional underserved areas of town, but promoting and providing native plants. And there's nothing like building community cohesiveness and camaraderie. Beyond, using a gift of a native plant is huge. And I love the idea of doing a native plant giveaway, but what you do is supporting the native plant research, providing the educational programs that you do to assist the public to better understand the consequences of plant selections and maintenance preferences. And now you can add another benefit to your repertoire. And as Lee brought up, promoting the level 4 native landscape certification program, the stewardship of native plant communities. And they did a great job. I'm looking forward to being able to be a part of that process of disseminating that information. But again, and they bring this out, that it begins with soil stewardship. How to overcome the barriers. Oh, I've been working on this how many decades? Let's see, how old am I now? But continue what we're doing. And I think that one of the great things that we can do is to try to change, and the Native Plant Society is doing a great job of this, but working with the public perception of aesthetics. And how do we modify that through education and some really well-maintained demonstration sites? Because there's nothing worse than a demonstration site that has not been well maintained, and that kind of destroys what you were trying to build. But again, helping people understand the benefits of their plant selections and maintenance practices. Recognizing when a landscape is not providing desired services is huge. Overcoming the fears of overgrown vegetation. Oh my God, in my work over the past 25, 30 years, the fear of overgrown vegetation because of snakes. And working with co-compliance, one of the things that we were able to do, especially with folks that had wildflower beds in their front yard, is that we ended up being able to tackle that with providing a mowed buffer. Interpretive signage, they just go such a long ways for helping people to understand what's going on a site, and then building those incentive programs. And so the use of conventional landscape maintenance practices, I think it's interesting. I see such an increase of all the mow and blow guys blowing all their material out into the street, and go, whoa, how do we change that concept of mowing it as short as you can to get out there? And of course, the grass or whatever, the plants don't grow as quickly because you've destroyed part of their roots. The top portion and the roots are in balance. And so they grow more slowly. So if you're getting paid to go out and keep it at a certain height, then you can actually, it's reduce the number of times you go out to the site by just pretty much destroying the vegetation. I'm seeing that a lot on commercial sites. And I've been working or talking with Parks and Rec, working with Michael Baldwin over at Milam Teeler Park and changing some of those landscape maintenance practices to see if we can get some benefits, not only to have healthier plant material on site, but to improve the water quality in the little lake there. So maybe looking at some training and certification programs for maintenance contractors. And what I'm hoping to do as we work with Public Works and Parks and Rec is that there's actually specifications for how to maintain these properties and requirements for companies that are going to be bid that they have to have a certification, something like a tree maintenance license that's in place now. And I just want to bring your attention to the bottom image on this slide. That's Breckenridge Park. That's right there, a little tributary that goes straight into the San Antonio River. And this is the concept by the contractor mowing it as low as they can so they don't have to come back, but they still get paid the same amount of money. So looking at those natural climate solutions, or whatever you want to call it, I feel like we can meet so many of our urban challenges by using the soil's inherent capabilities to be a carbon sink and water sponge to build a more resilient urban areas. And there's a lot of folks out there that say our environmental issues around the planet will be solved in urban areas. And I think San Antonio already is, but can continue to be an incredible leader in this area. And one of my goals is that so that I can see kids like those two little girls on the bottom there being able to play safely in our creeks and streams. And here's some great references. I could not put these books down. The Soil Will Save Us is great. It's got a lot of wonderful information. It does have an agriculture perspective, but a lot of this information that I've shared with you is in it. But I loved Grass, Soil, and Hope. And this is actually in our library. I just ate this book up. I must have had 14 pages of notes that I took from this book. And a lot of the information that I've talked about, including presentations like the one that I gave to the Sierra Club, which was our first one, the Great Garden Volunteers of South Texas, and this one will be on our website. But you'll also find the Unified Development Code recommendations that we have for park dedication, stormwater runoff. And acknowledgement. I just can't say enough about Lisa Martinez and her role in bringing so much of this to fruition and making San Antonio the very first city in the state of Texas to receive the NRCS's service of doing baseline soil carbon and percolation data analysis. And we are so grateful to the interns that we've received from Trinity University and UTSA, but Brendan Shue, this will be his third semester with us and helping on some of these issues that we've been talking about. And of course, the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance for its continued financial support. It keeps paying me to do what I love. I am so lucky.